It's 3:30. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Scott Shepherd here.
Walk here. Heidi Shigasi.
Bill Irving.
Peter Royce. Okay, thank you. Review of the minutes from last week, November 5th. Any alterations or comments? Okay, thank you, Amy.
Accept. Second.
All in favor?
Shepherd, aye.
Outstanding questions and discussions, new questions from prior budget chapters. Okay, nothing?
I have a
Whoop.
question on park. I think we.
Okay, that's coming up now.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Okay, so moving on to chapter 22, recreation.
Oh, we need a microphone.
At the table, we have our Parks and Recreation Director, Jessica Tennis, joined by the Assistant Parks and Recreation Director, Sarah Bailey.
Hello.
Hi.
Greetings.
So Fareed, if you want to start, please.
Yes. So last year, we had an issue, the group had an issue with the amount of money that you guys were requesting for the maintenance.
Mhm.
And Mona and I said yes, and then the gentleman said no to that money that was putting aside. And because the discussion was that the maintenance of park is ongoing every year, and it should be part of the operating budget, and it was not. And this year, you guys are doing again, putting money aside, not as part of the operating costs.
Yeah.
So why is that? Last year, you guys barely made it, for the yes that we said and the public supported.
Yeah.
But now you guys are putting $20,000 again on that.
Yeah. So that conversation started a few years ago at the ABC level. We had some discussions whether it should be a capital reserve account versus part of the operating budget. There have been a couple different conversations each year, but we feel that the capital reserve is the most appropriate place for that, just because the money doesn't lapse from year to year. So for example, this past year, we put down a brand new layer of wood chips, which had less maintenance for the weekly maintenance that we had. So our bill that we had anticipated for that was a little less than what we had projected. So every year, depending on, what we're doing to that facility, the needs kind of ebb and flow. We'll have our consistent, shade structures that need to be maintained, the porta potties that need to be on site. We'll still have the need to have those playground surfacings, maintained consistently. But sometimes it's hard to be able to identify that $20,000 every single year, knowing that, every 2 years we have to have a very large expenditure for about 100 yards of the playground surfacing wood chips. So it's that the ebb and flow from year to year and making sure that we have enough money without having those crazy impacts to the operating budget when we have to increase for a year to get that 100 yards of mulch or playground surfacing, those kind of things. So.
Okay, so if it's not approved, what are you going to do? So what is your backup plan?
We're going to have to get, so right now we are asking for the money because the playground is basically a free opportunity for the community. It has that remaining overhead costs. We don't and can't charge for people to be able to use that facility. And so if we were expected to have to take on that maintenance of that park again, you would have to see, some substantial changes within the recreation part of what we do. So, looking at some of that extra money that we would have to kind of put towards the parks would have to come out of some of those things, like the variety of the free community events that we offer, or, limiting some of those type of community things that we offer to everybody, potentially increasing prices, those kind of things to try to make sure that we're, offsetting that overhead, but also making sure that we're staying on track with our projection. So, yeah.
Okay, so that's your standing. So
When's the last time you reviewed pricing?
We review pricing pretty consistently every year. Before we even advertise for another program, we're looking at what the proposed budget is. We make sure that all of our supplies, we try really hard not to bulk buy all of our, basketballs every year. We're buying a few of them every year to kind of limit that overhead, but try to make those prices as consistent as possible. But we also do compare to what other communities that are offering, similar style programs. Obviously, communities are a little bit different from community to community, but we try really hard to keep those prices to maintain where we're at, but also make them reasonable for people within the community. So, yeah.
So were there things in particular you went up on this year?
We just do your typical about $5 price increase on some of those programs, like basketball, the cost of our referees and some of the jerseys, those things go up. So we've had some increases. I think probably the largest increase was summer camp, I want to say.
From last year to this past summer was $100 increase.
Yeah, so we did about $100 increase for summer camp. So we're trying really hard. And again, looking at what other communities are doing and trying to stay, comparable within that market.
I think one of the big items is before and after school, though. What's going on with that?
Yeah. We've been doing consistent, $5 price increase adjusting. We're really trying hard to kind of look at the hourly rate and making sure, because the morning care program is less hours than the the afternoon programs. And so we're trying really hard to kind of look at that hourly rate, but we have been, trying to maintain pricing. We also have been kind of looking at what other, before and after school care, whether it's through a private sector or public sector, what their prices are to make sure that we're not outpricing them, but also overpricing them either. So yeah.
One of the things that I'm really proud of the work that Jesse and Sarah have done really over the last year, but it's been a couple of years worth of effort, is managing the revolving fund, the cost of the revolving fund, paying attention to revenue, paying attention to expenses. In Chapter 8, if you look at the second page, this is the revolving fund, essentially the revolving fund budget, the budget for revenue, the budget for expenses. So we have data back to 2023, we have an estimate for the end of 2025, and then we have the projection for 2026. And probably the best indicator of the work that they've done in trying to understand and run that revolving fund as it should be. We're looking at $750,000 of business a year. Under expenses, you'll see that first category, revolving fund overhead expenses. And so they started to take a holistic view of the revolving fund and saying, there are certain operations, there are certain things that we do that those costs should be borne by all of the programs. So whether that's some of the staffing or some of the community events or some of those things that don't have offsetting revenue, we need to make sure that when we're looking at setting revenue and looking at our revenue projections, that we're covering all those costs as well, so that the program aspects of the Parks and Recreation Department can be self-sufficient. And so that hasn't always been done in Barrington. It's always been a money in, money out situation. There used to be some oversight. Once Jesse took over as the director, starting to look at quarterly financial analyses for the revolving fund recreation commission, and then building out the revolving fund budget in a way that makes sure that they are looking ahead to all of their revenue and expenditures.
Were there any programs that don't pay for themselves, or do they all pay?
They all have to at least break even. So
Okay.
yes, yep. Yeah, except for the community events. The community events are the only thing that we have, like Fall Festival, those are free, summer concert series, those kind of things. But everything else is break even.
And that it's worth mentioning that even in the area of community events, that doesn't mean that program fees are subsidizing all of the costs of those events. At their leadership, they've been able to secure tens of thousands of dollars of sponsorships from local organizations to put on those and beef up those community events. And that's been a very successful partnership, taking the business community in our area and giving them exposure and an opportunity to support the community events that they put on. I'd like to touch on the topic of the capital reserve and the operating budget. I know this was a topic of discussion at the last meeting after I had to leave. I don't think from my perspective and from the Parks and Recreation Department perspective, I don't think it matters much whether there's funding available in the operating budget or in a capital reserve. I think the initial impetus for capital reserve instead of the operating budget was the cyclical nature of some of the expenditures. You know, Jesse mentioned they've got about a $7,500 bill every other year for mulch at the playground. And so the operating budget, if it were just going to be a one-year deal, every other year, the operating budget would be $7,500 higher, which back to our election wages issue, it seems cyclical. But maybe there's a compromise. Maybe those items on, you know, now we're in chapter 22. This is the last document in the chapter, the park maintenance plan.
There does seem to be some consistent.
There are some that
items.
are expenditures every single year.
Yep.
And so if it's a recommendation of this group to take those items and say those items should be in the operating budget and reflected as a regular operating budget expense, and then we can go back and look at, you know, maybe it's $4,000 a year is the request for a capital reserve, and or, you know, maybe it's 10,000 and the plan is not to present it every single year or something. If it doesn't pass one year, you can present it the next year, but put some plan together so that the cyclical expenses have funding available. So that would be an option if this group wanted to make that recommendation in terms of adjusting the operating budget. So just quick math, it looks like of the costs that are relatively consistent, we're looking at about $15,000 worth of operating expenses that we could bring those into the operating budget opposed to funding them from the capital reserve.
I just think it belongs in the operating budget. I really do. I don't dispute that you need the money. It's
Yeah.
that it's there, but
Yep.
I think it belongs in the operating budget. So, and
One less place to ask residents to spend more money.
How do you gentlemen, for that perspective, recommend that we handle the cyclical expenses? How would you like to see that budgeted for?
Which ones would you say are cyclical?
I think the best example is the mulch. We don't need 100 yards of mulch every year, but we need 100 yards of mulch every other year.
Oh, she has it biannually.
Yeah, and it's about a $7,500 expense.
I would agree that that is cyclical and should remain,
As a capital reserve expenditure.
yes, most definitely.
I look at it as $5,000-6,000
Yeah.
or something. It's not going to break a budget either way if it goes up or down.
And that's a reasonable point in terms of, so, you know, maybe the number isn't 15, maybe the number is 18. Maybe the operating budget is 18, and in those years where the higher expenditures are necessary, you know, we prepare a budget that kind of helps offset that in some way, whether in this budget in particular or making sure that the select board understand that this is a priority that we'll need to attend to, but in favor of trying to keep an operating budget level year over year and not going up and down a lot.
Yeah, the reason that I wanted that, because I wanted to make sure that it's on an operating cost, so it doesn't fail, you know, what passing. So.
Yeah. Yep.
Looks like you had an idea.
I'm just trying to figure out a way to run this over 2 years. What's the best way to do that? Because this is a cost that we need to spend over 2 years. How do we do it and avoid the swing?
Every year, 3,500 more.
Let us sit down and let us work on that. We'll work on trying to put a plan together where we can try to sequence some of the cyclical activities and maybe consolidate some others to even it out a little bit better and come back with a number. My guess is the number is going to be between 18 and 20,000 that would be added to the operating budget in lieu of this capital reserve request. And that would be something that we do every year. It's in the operating budget, you know, assuming that it's supported by residents. And we'll bring back a recommendation. Any other input you want us to consider?
Anybody else? No?
Okay.
All set.
Thank you for doing that.
Of course.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
temporary offices.
Oh, yeah.
Moving on to chapter 23, which is review of the library.
Approaching the table, we have Susan Gaudiello, Library Trustee Chair, and Lydia Goodwin, the Library Director.
Questions for library? Scott and I have none.
No, I don't. Go ahead, start.
No, I have none either.
Yeah, I have none.
It was nice to meet you all.
You did raise a question, I think, that was forwarded to us about the solar
Yes.
project, and I think you had asked that last time I was here. So would you like us to talk a little bit about how that's going, or?
Sure.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Building in general would be very, very welcome.
Building in general is going great, has exceeded our, I don't want to say wildest expectations, but has well exceeded expectations. And I've been working with Amy to make sure our numbers are consistent. So we're coming in under budget, which is great. With respect to the solar, you'll notice in the budget that the amount that we budgeted for electricity, it's an all-electric building next year, is, I don't remember the number, but it's around $12,000, which is about $1,000 a month. And Lydia can share with you what we have seen so far. But we budgeted that amount because we believe we need a full year with the solar in operation to know exactly, we couldn't come to you and say, oh, we think we're going to save this amount. And then if we're wrong on that, or, working out some bugs, which we're doing right now, we might not meet that goal, if you know what I mean. So and talking with the Energy Committee as well, they have reinforced that you really need a year of data before you can better predict what your funding needs are going to be. Would you like to know what we've seen so far for bills? We're happy to
I
give you-
would, I definitely, yes.
There you go, Lydia's
Okay.
got that.
So July was a partial month. We moved into the new building on July 10th. The solar went live on July 9th. So the bill for July was $872.59. August, it went down to $397.21. And September, it went up to $699.25. So the solar company's been working on trying to figure out what the issue was. And today I found out there's some shorts on the panels on the roof. They're scheduled to come out on Friday to fix that. So October's bill was $1,157.48.
And that's representing cooling for the summer now.
Cooling for the summer, and then the heat's been on since about third week in September.
So we really haven't had to run through a cold spell to see how. And correct me if I'm wrong, the only heat in that facility is from the heat pumps.
Correct.
There's no backup propane, no backup
Nope.
electric, or okay.
No. Propane tanks were removed during construction. And I think also the bill for June before solar was activated was a little over $1,000.
Yeah, it was just shy of $1,040.
So do you guys have generators?
Do we have a generator?
Yes.
Yes, the building came with a generator. But we've had that serviced, and there were some, Jim Anderson, the facilities manager, is handling that, and he just forwarded over a bill for $500 for some repairs that were needed. So, and that's that's run on diesel fuel, I believe.
Well, it looks good so far.
As far as the solar or the diesel, I mean,
No, the electricity, the electric
Yeah.
bill.
yeah.
And then, so that's, when you say August was X amount, are we sending money, are we sending electricity back to the grid that we're getting paid for? Or does that include that?
Since we're getting a bill, I would say that reduces the bill that we're getting from Eversource. So far, we have not had a month that the production of energy by the solar panels exceeded what we were using.
Could you expect that to happen, or? plan?
Did we expect to have?
Did you plan to be able to sell back, or was it just?
I did not have personally, I don't have solar at home, so I don't have any personal experience. But given the size of the building, the utilization, and having heat, electric, all the lighting, all the technology, everything is on that one. I don't expect that we'll have, if we do,
No.
great.
Yeah.
You know, it would be nice if we did, we might have excess in the summer, in the real sunny months, that then we'll be drawing on that in the winter months, but we're not storing it, so you're right, it would be a take back. But I do, even with full production and good sun, the expectation from our energy consultants, resilient building groups, was that even in best case scenario, we will still have some, several $1,000s a year at the very best that
And
we'll
with-
ultimately be spending.
With net metering, I would expect those sunny months to bank kilowatt hours, which will be drawn down as we head into winter. So it's certainly an option if you generate a surplus and you're not going to use it, that they will pay you for it. But if you're going to use it kind of within an annual cycle, you're better off just banking it, which is what the Energy Committee has in calculating the expected load of the library and the size. Again, they went with not just a roof mount, but the ground mount in addition to try to balance and get that the best bang for the buck in terms of utilization behind the meter. Solar energy generation is most efficient, most financially efficient if you can just use the electrons on site, kind of behind the meter, they call it, opposed to sending it back to the grid where you're only getting a fraction of the value at that point.
One of the advantages, one of the reasons we did do the ground mount is in hopes that that will also generate some benefit in the winter months when the roof might get covered with snow, whereas the ground mount, the snow is supposed to come off it pretty quickly.
On behalf of taxpayers, thank you for doing that all at the library.
Well, thank all the people that donated
Yeah.
money in order to make that happen.
A couple of points I'd like to make. First, I want to underscore the point that the library trustee chair just made, which is that the library building project was completed or is nearing completion, tens of thousands of dollars to the better. And so a lot of credit is due to the library trustee chair, the trustees, the staff, and certainly their team for being able to manage that project in such a way that there's money left over. If you're interested, the library trustee chair will be presenting to the select board on this coming Monday an update about the project, the finances. There are a few rebates and some other things that they're going to talk about. And so there'll be more information to come. Susan's buttoning up that information in preparation for Monday's meeting. The second point, which is one of the recommendations that Susan and I will make to the select board in regards to the rebates. The library solar project, again, which was an all donation project, all donated funds to install that solar, was eligible for a $10,000 state rebate. And we've received that rebate. So there's $10,000 that the town has received as a rebate from the solar project. And for Susan and the trustees, the request was that it really felt like that should be used for the library in some way. This is donated dollars, and yes, it's unencumbered, but it should be used for the library. And so the proposal that we'll ask the select board to consider is to take that $10,000 and through the process of RSA 3195B, which allows the select board to accept and expend unanticipated revenue. The plan would be to accept those $10,000 and spend them in 2026 towards a portion of the library's building maintenance operating budget. And so the current proposal, and I'm just getting the sheet up so I can talk in real numbers. The current proposal for building maintenance is a net increase of about $10,000. So you'll remember that in consolidation of budget and purposes, the contracts line, certain purposes from the contracts line were brought in and consolidated into the building maintenance line. The building maintenance line is up $22,861, but again, $12,871 of that is from the contracts line. So the net difference is about $10,000 in terms of overall budget increase. So the proposal to the select board will be, let's zero that out. Let's have that be level funded, use the 10,000 from this solar rebate for the purposes of those planned expenditures in building maintenance in 2026. And then one of the benefits of that approach relative to electricity and solar is if, which I think we all hope it is, if the current budget proposal for electricity utilization in 2026 is high, then in 2027 budget development, if it doesn't need to be $1,000 a month for electricity, now we're not, the maybe portion of that budget, portion of those funds isn't even in the budget already, and we're just doing a true up for the 2027 budget proposal. So certainly if this group was interested, I'm happy to take a recommendation to the select board if you like that idea, if you like that approach in terms of using those rebate dollars to reduce the 2026 library operating budget by $10,000. But it is something they'll consider regardless.
Can you clarify for me? I'm looking at the budget cover, and it looks like building maintenance is going up by $22,861.
Correct.
So I thought you said the 10,000 was going to cover that increase.
It will. If you look up 2 lines to contracts, there's a reduction of 12,871. So that isn't an actual reduction. That's just moving that where it was budgeted, that portion which was budgeted in contracts is moved into building maintenance for the 2026 proposal.
Okay.
So the net is actually just under.
So what were those contracts? I'm sure that's in here somewhere.
One is the cleaning service, the janitorial service. We used to have a janitor, and even before we moved, we switched to a janitorial service that comes 3 days a week.
Thank you.
I don't recall the other details.
So why just put it against maintenance, that money? Why not put it towards your capital reserve, for example, for, future upgraded technology, which I think you were still considering?
That's another topic that we talked about this morning. Connor and I talked about that.
Great idea, by the way.
Because we've been advocating for that, and I think we provided in our information to the committee and to the select board the technology plan. We actually, you remember, those of you who were on this board last year, we went through the list of all the needs that there were and that hadn't been accounted for.
Yeah.
We've addressed a lot of those needs, probably most of those needs we addressed and spent about $12,000 out of the technology capital reserve and some of the project funds to really get all our technology up to date. Things were crashing before we even moved.
Right.
Things were so old. You remember that story. So Lydia has put together the technology, a 5-year technology maintenance plan, basically, so that we're not having everything collapse at once.
So currently you think it's satisfactory?
No, what's left in that fund right now is about $5,000.
Okay.
And it's about, well, you should.
Over the next 5 years, it'll be about $5,000 a year to upkeep, technology upgrades to make sure that we're not having to replace all those PCs and things like that all at the same time. That's what happened this time. The operating systems went out on them and they were not going to be supported. We did save a ton of money by going to 365 and not having to have an in-house server. That was a lot of money that was being projected that we were going to need for this new building. So it was about $30,000 that we saved.
Back to Scott's question. That's a topic of discussion on the 17th. The proposal that Susan and I will make to the select board, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but I told you there's tens of thousands of dollars of project savings. A portion of those tens of thousands of dollars is the balance of the library and community center capital reserve account. It's about $28,000 left in that account. And so that, if those dollars aren't spent and don't need to be spent, the purpose was kind of limited when the capital reserve was established, and that capital reserve should be closed. And in talking with Susan, one of the priorities of the trustees in the library is to fund that technology plan, find a way to fund that technology plan. And so the proposal going to the select board on Monday will be to have probably 2 warrant articles. One, to close the library and community center capital reserve which will create a surplus to the general fund revenue of $28,000. And then a separate corresponding warrant article to make a one-time contribution to the library technology capital reserve of $15,000, which is sufficient to fund the entire 5-year plan that Lydia put together. So the surplus or the net impact of those two articles, which would be contingent on each other, would be a contribution to general fund revenue of about $13,000 as we close out that library community center capital reserve.
Why
So
not just fund the acquisition of the technology now using that money and zero it out that way as opposed to putting two more articles on the, for voters to vote for?
well, you can't.
You can't.
So,
Okay.
so you can't put, only town meeting can deposit funds in a capital reserve, period.
Okay.
And so that's why you need a warrant article to do it. In terms of spending the $10,000, the problem is the library isn't ready to spend that $10,000. The $20,200 technology plan is through 2030, and they'll be spending those dollars over those years. And we can't hold through RSA with 3195B, we can't hold an accept and expend unanticipated revenue for 5 years. That's not the purpose of an account
Right,
like that.
gotcha.
We need to use a capital reserve. So
You wouldn't bring it
At the risk
forward.
of sounding greedy, we could close that capital reserve and put the entire $28,000 over into the tech capital reserve. But because when we get to whatever it is, after the end of the 5-year plan, well, we'll have another, it's going to constantly be $5,000 a year. If we go the route that Connor and I've talked about and funding it, we will not need to request a warrant article for $3,000 or $5,000, like we've been doing $3,000 a year for quite a few number of years. We would not ask for that. We would just leave that. The other expense that we have not included and have no way to anticipate is if our circulation system, which we got in like 29 or 10, that's when the capital reserve was started for that purpose. We're using the same company, the same system. There may be upgrades to it. We are not hearing that it's going to fold. If it folded, then we would need to draw on that fund and have to replenish that.
Okay.
Would there be any value, what is the lifespan of the circulation systems usually?
About 10 years.
We're at 10 years plus?
But they're not recommending that we have to upgrade it. Even, we're not hearing any of that.
From the company.
From the company, because it's on their server, so it's on a remote server. And so any upgrades that they do on their end comes with the subscription service that we have every year. So you're basically getting those upgrades.
They recommend 10 years?
Well, that's what the industry says.
But it's not an actual server,
Yeah.
system on a server in-house?
In-house,
So this
no.
is different. Okay, thank you for
And it's a
clarifying that.
system that we've had and is working very well for us, so we haven't felt the need to shop around and look at different systems. We're content with the system we have. If it was a system that was becoming outdated, unfunctional, and now we really need to shop and find something else, that would be different. But
And thank you for providing the information on page 9 about the circulation numbers from, what was it, July to August of last year and this year.
yes, we've gotten a lot of new patrons. So I think that's, I know you folks look at all the warrant articles as well, and depending on how the select board responds to the idea that Connor has outlined, if that goes forward, we would basically withdraw our request for a $3,000 addition to the warrant article. Staffing thing.
wasn't a question. It wasn't a question
It was
from
not
this group.
It wasn't a question.
eliminating that one. Well, we have, I will just mention, we have had for years a line in our personnel section that
Oh,
is
that one.
like $1,000 or $1,300, something like that, to be able to hire somebody to fill in on vacations when people leave. We have not used that, and we have recently added a 15-hour-a-week library assistant who can work at the desk, reshelve, do all that sort of stuff. And it's a flexible person, a flexible schedule. So as long as the staffing pattern that we have proposed goes forward, we would be able to eliminate that line for that vacation fill-in. It's a small amount of money, but we wouldn't really need to carry that forward as long as the staffing pattern that we currently have that we're proposing to continue remains.
Where would that line be?
Well, it's included in the part-time hourly.
Okay, that's what I thought.
But if you look at the library wages and benefits, it's the very last entry, the fill-in. This would be the next page after
Yeah.
what you're looking at.
It's obviously a minor amount of money, but I feel like the staffing pattern we're currently operating with is working pretty well for us.
I'm trying to wrap my head around, so you're saying we won't need to be asking that, was it 3,000 or 5,000 annually?
It's the,
3,000, yeah.
that 3,000 was for the warrant article for tech. And then we would not be asking for temporary employees, which was $1,351.
But at some point, you know, you're always going to have that ongoing of $5,000 a year.
right.
So at some point, a warrant article will need to be
We
done.
would need to begin to
2029 or
that
2030.
replenish that
Okay,
again.
I was going to say, that's going to run out, so, okay,
Yes,
thank you.
so at a certain point, that's going to run out, and then
Yeah.
we'd be back asking for whatever the next plan is for technology. But I would be assuming it's going to continue to be 4,000 to 5,000 a year. So the more we put in it now, the longer before we have to come back and ask.
Is there an ongoing IT replacement plan for the whole town, or is
Yes.
it department specific?
No, so the town, managed service provider for the town prepares a infrastructure replacement schedule year over year. I've tasked them with structuring that replacement plan to have basically almost level fund the amount we spend on infrastructure. So in a general sense, it's 4 years of replacing, end user units, and then the 5th year is networking equipment. That's not exactly how it works out in practice. But that's a way that we try to level fund the replacement needs in the operating budget. So does this group have an opinion, one, on the $10,000 rebate to reduce the 2026 operating budget by $10,000?
I would say yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll record that as a recommendation in the minutes that the Advisory Budget Committee recommends supporting, the Select Board supporting, using the $10,000 state solar rebate to reduce 2026 operating budget. Relative to the technology, capital reserve, and the library community center capital reserve, does this group have an opinion on closing the library community center capital reserve because those funds are no longer needed?
Yeah.
Seeing
I would say
support.
yes.
Does this group have an opinion on using all or a portion of those funds to ask, as a separate warrant article, ask residents to send a portion of those dollars to the library technology capital reserve with a contingent warrant article so that residents first have to vote to close the library community center capital reserve and separately vote to add a portion to the library technology capital reserve? Seeing head nods, except.
I'm not quite sure I understand that.
Okay, so there's 28,000 library community center capital reserve. The library technology plan through 2030 is short $15,000. So between now and 2030, the library will need $15,000 to fund the plan that they've established. Excellent, by the way. So the default plan would be to ask voters every year between now and 2030 for $3,000 or $4,000 to have the money necessary to spend the $4,000 or $5,000 a year. As an alternative, in lieu of asking annually for the next 4 years or so for technology capital reserve contribution, we ask residents once in 2026 to add $15,000 to the library technology capital reserve to fully fund it through 2030, still leaving a surplus of the library community center capital reserve, which would go back to taxpayers. So the net of those two articles would be about a half-a-cent benefit on the tax rate of the money going back. And then we wouldn't bring a library technology capital reserve article until 2029 or so. Certainly you could go out farther, but
How much comes back to the general fund?
13,000 in that scenario.
I'd be okay with that.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, so there's support to recommend that proposal. Okay. That's how, I think that will be helpful for the select board on Monday,
Yeah.
to have that input.
Thank you for all your hard
Thank you.
work.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful library.
Thank you so much.
Residents
Was a
are,
lot better, smoother.
Question unrelated to the budget
Transactions.
cost.
and it is a pride of joy among residents. I was with somebody today and they said, and we've got this brand new library and it's just fantastic,
Oh,
so.
my grandkids.
Did you say we did not spend the total amount for the bond?
Correct.
So what happens to that money?
That is also a topic for discussion on the 17th.
Okay,
So I think there are options. He just said what's happens with the proceeds from the bond that were unspent. So Susan's working on what exactly that number will be, and then we'll figure out how that's used
yeah, thank you.
or not used. A couple of items, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, kind of related to rebates and unanticipated dollars.
Sure.
So you remember the town hall solar project was eligible for a rebate through the state and through the IRS, which we received. Camera back on there. Okay. So the select board has a few ideas for those dollars in terms of funding unanticipated projects, but I would like to propose that this group consider recommending that we take the increased election costs, similar to how we did a couple years ago using the ARPA funds, and ask the select board to use the rebates, the unanticipated revenue that they have collected and will collect, to fund the 14, 19, say $20,000 of increased election costs, which result from the fact that we had one election in 2025 and have 3 in 2026. So that the operating budget would be level funded, and instead of going up 20,000 this year and down 20,000 the next year, that we use this opportunity of unanticipated revenue as we did with ARPA in 2024 and level fund.
This is the same issue with the recreation department.
It is. It is. Now, the elections don't bring in money. We haven't figured out how to monetize elections yet.
$5 at the door.
Yeah. So this isn't always possible. I think it's easier for the recreation department, and the swings aren't as big. You know, in the town clerk, we go from having 1 election to 3 elections, to 1 election to 5 elections, to 1 election. So this is an every year problem. And I think it was Amy's idea, credit where credit's due, with the ARPA funds to take and say, hey, let's mitigate the operating budget impact in this way. And so I think because we have some rebates, so the town hall solar I mentioned, the library project's eligible for 2 additional rebates, energy efficient rebates, HVAC and electricity. That will bring in about another $12,000. And so the select board has a couple of pots of money that they're able to accept. And I think this is a great way to mitigate the increases in the operating budget by, in this case, reducing $20,000. And then in 2020, for the 2027 budget, we'll be close. The budget shouldn't have to go up much, maybe just, inflation numbers for elections at that point. And then we won't have to see an increase to the budget again until 2028, which will be a big one because of the presidential election.
I guess I'm just wondering, following on the tour of the police and fire, would it be more strategic to take that money and apply it to a portion or, a big enough amount of money to get the studies that we need to do and where we're going with that funded?
I just don't think there'll be enough. And I also don't think, right now the projections, so on Monday, again, on the 17th, the police and fire chiefs will make a presentation to a joint meeting of the select board and planning board. to discuss the plan for space needs in the future of the public safety building. Their current plan has evolved to the point where they're asking the select board to support a warrant article that will fund 3 distinct items. First, it will fund a space needs analysis for public safety now and for the next couple of decades. Second, it will fund an impact fee study to establish the how much, what if any, responsibility that new homes in Barrington will have to pay towards any addition or renovation of public safety building. Third, and maybe most important, will be the site selection and feasibility and preliminary engineering for the actual work. So looking at what would it look like on Ramsdale Lane? What is the feasibility of this? What does that do to police response time? What does that do to traffic in that area? And then doing preliminary engineering so that we could go to voters in 2027 with the bond article that's enough money and we have enough details. So you wouldn't do the impact fee study on its own because that's, you don't need impact fee if you're not doing a building project. The space needs, okay, so that could be helpful, but it becomes pretty unhelpful if you don't do anything else. We already know that we need more space. We already know that the need's there. We want to have up-to-date analysis there so that can advise the engineering and architecture. And the engineering and architecture, that phase will be $75,000 or $90,000 is what it looks like right now. And we don't have enough to fund all of that. And so I don't know that there's a smart way to do it that way. And I think, honestly, any way that we can reduce what's being asked of residents in March of 2026 will increase the likelihood of the things that we actually do need to ask for, that they'll be supported. So reducing the operating budget proposal, I think, will be helpful to that end. That it's not just dollar signs across the board.
I guess what happens if you put forward a separate warrant article to pay for that and it fails, we're stuck another year behind.
I know, and we've talked about that. And, the unfortunate conclusion, the unfortunate reality, I should say, of that potential outcome is if we take an article to voters again, asking for, $150,000, a little bit of a different scope, if they say no again, we're not doing what we need to help the residents understand what the needs are in town. And, not for nothing, but the residents have a right to say that. The residents have a right to say, this isn't money well spent. We don't want to spend money in this area. So I think especially because they said no once, I think it's wise to do what's necessary to educate and inform and empower them to make informed decisions, and hope that they'll support the need with a separate warrant article. Does that logic make sense?
Yeah, but I might counter it, not strongly, but it's sort of like hiring another police person as a separate article or not. To me, this is something that I think the town has a responsibility to look at, given the scope of development that's been proposed and will likely happen around here. And so delays actually make it more and more difficult to me.
What do other members think?
I need some clarification on what's being proposed on Ramsdale.
In 2024, the $150,000 warrant article was focused on 774 Franklin Pierce Highway, a renovation addition to that building.
Right.
Since that time, through reflection, the police department feels that they probably too early on ruled out any other options. And they love being co-located with fire and EMS, but they also feel like we should appropriately explore and rule in or rule out other sites. The top of the short list in terms of another site for a separately located police department is Ramsdale Lane, the location of the old town hall.
Where the old school was, yeah.
Right.
And that's just the police department.
So I think other options would be explored, but it seems that in terms of viable options, building a standalone police department on Ramsdale and renovating the existing building to have the additional space necessary for fire might make some sense.
How much did we put into renovating the police area a couple of years ago?
So we spent a collective about $80,000 in 2019 reconfiguring space. We've probably spent a collective $20,000 or $25,000 making other modifications to that building, doing the bunk rooms, installing a service window for the fire administrative assistant. We just did some reconfiguration in the police side again, just Band-Aids. So we've spent, a little over $100,000 on renovations, I would say, since about 2018.
Some cost.
Sometimes that's what it takes, and it needs a new roof.
It does.
Yeah, that's,
Does need a new roof. So anyways, back to the question about election wages. I think what does the group think about proposing utilization of that unanticipated revenue to cover the $20,000 for election wages?
Opinions, Scott?
I'm
Neither
okay
here
with
nor
it.
there.
All the same money eventually.
Yeah.
And I think this is a more direct way to benefit residents in that way. The default would be that it would just become essentially surplus revenue, which would then go into unassigned fund balance, which would either be used to fund warrant articles if there's enough surplus unassigned fund balance, or like we've done more recently, there's been a lot less, and we've just trued up to 12.5%, using it to buy down taxes at tax rate setting. So I think this is the more direct. Instead of increasing the budget next year, we use those dollars for municipal purposes. Okay. I'm seeing head nods. Anybody
Yeah,
strongly
I mean,
opposed?
My only negative would be it increases the default budget for the next year.
It does not.
Does not.
It actually reduces the default budget for, so if the budget as presented is passed, the default budget for 2027 would be essentially 20,000 higher. Now, that's not how Amy and I write a default budget. If we don't need the money in the year, then we take that out of the default budget.
Okay.
A lot of communities don't. Hey, a dollar's a dollar and we don't have to spend it there, but that's not how we treat a default budget. We treat a default budget as close to possible to what the minimum needs are. Okay, so I'm seeing enough head nods. So we'll include in the recommendation from the Advisory Budget Committee to use $20,000 from unanticipated revenue to offset the election wages cost, and we'll back those out of the budget. Okay, I have another proposal for you. I feel like this is Christmas for the Advisory Budget Committee. This is the part of the process where we've gotten to the point, we're concerned enough about the numbers. We know you're concerned about the numbers, and so we come up with creative options. So you heard at the last meeting and you saw in the minutes that we still have 2 accounts from state revenue sharing, essentially, for roads and bridges. The roads account has about $60,000 in it, a little over $60,000, and the bridges account has close to $150,000 in it. And so I'd like the budget committee to
Those aren't capital reserves, are they?
No, these are special accounts created by the legislature. SB 401, they said, we're going to send you this money. And of course, they didn't contemplate all the things that you'd think that they would, like, when does it lapse? What are all of the things you can and can't spend it on? And so
That's what I was going to
there's
ask.
best practices, but one is for roads and one is for bridges.
interesting.
And so we've been using some of the money. I'll be honest, there was more in there at this point than I thought that there was, which isn't a bad problem to have, but we should use it. We should be using those dollars. And I think we talked about the paving increase and the value of increasing the default budget to make sure that we're able to grow that over time. We set the tax rate yesterday. $19.56 is the total. We estimated it to be $19.61. And so it's an 11% increase. And so I don't, although I believe in the merit of increasing the paving budget, and increasing, if it's supported by residents, increasing the default budget in future years. I'm very concerned that we'll end up with a default budget regardless, and that extra $50,000 in the operating budget proposal is the single biggest increase in the current proposal, which we have an alternative for. So I would recommend that the Advisory Budget Committee consider asking the Select Board to dedicate the $68,000 that's left in the roads SB 401 money for the the additional paving and reduce the operating budget proposal to $700,000.
Is that something do we have a deadline and when we have to act on that money?
No, but we should spend it. But this was 2023.
Yeah, they should put a stoplight on that street. Seriously.
I had no
Be
problem.
a drop in the bucket.
Makes sense.
Seeing head nods?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. So collectively, as a result of just the last hour, that's $80,000 from the operating budget proposal, right? We calculated that it was only 140, right? That was non-wage and benefit increases, and so now it's 60, and so that. Let me get the operating budget most up to date. There are a couple small adjustments that not really worth mentioning, but let me open it up and tell you what $80,000 does to the proposal. I have more good news, by the way. So just buckle up. Christmas in November.
Hey, Chris.
But the bridge money
Chris
also
Kringle.
does not have a time limit on it, Connor?
We got our TIF grant from,
We got 60,000.
No. Say that again. Here.
The bridge money also does not have a.
Correct. Yep. Okay, so the current budget proposal is 10,441,127 minus 80,000 is 10,361,127, which is an increase of 470,000, which in percent is 4.75%. So I think that puts us in a lot better spot than we were to start. Maybe not perfect, but okay. So maybe the last bit of good news for tonight. So the town has been working towards a couple of infrastructure projects down by the Swains Lake Dam. And the biggest of those infrastructure projects is the replacement of Lakeside Oaks culverts, which we're only funding 10% of. FEMA's covering 90%. And the 10% from the town is coming from the Bridge and Culvert Capital Reserve. Perfect. Move on. We're good. We're done. The two additional projects, one is addressing the letter of deficiency we have from the state in installing a riprap filter on the front face of the dam. And the second is underwater concrete gate repairs at the dam. We had an underwater inspection a couple of years ago. It identified deficiencies that need to be addressed. And so we had an opportunity, because of the sequencing of these projects, to combine them into one. And so we did that. We advertised the project. We received proposals last week, and on Monday, the Select Board awarded the project. Not only did we benefit from reduced overhead in combining all three of the projects, one mobilization, the crews there, everything else, we also experienced a pretty significant cost savings, like to the tune of $100,000, because the competitive bid is the same company that is installing the old Settlers Road Bridge for us this winter. And so the Select Board awarded that project. It came in, I wouldn't say a lot less than we anticipated. The culvert portion was just about what we had estimated budget-wise. The dam work, the underwater concrete repair, and the riprap filter came in quite a bit less than we had anticipated, which is tremendous news. And the result of that is that I don't think we will have to ask residents for any warrant article contribution to fund the commitment that the select board made with the Conservation Commission for the Richardson Pond Dam. We'd originally earmarked a $190,000 warrant article, understanding that we would reduce that if there was surplus from the project at the Swains Lake Dam. And we expect that there will be plenty of surplus in the capital reserve for from the Swains Lake Dam project. And so that's a $190,000 warrant article that we don't need, which is huge.
Where exactly is the dam on Swains Lake?
If you know Hall Road, so the portion of Hall Road where you can see the lake, that's about where the dam is. Okay. Lakeside Oaks Drive is the private road which leads, that's the town's access. The next road to the south is Rosemary. So Lakeside Oaks and Rosemary kind of go on either side of the dam. Did you bring any good news, Amy?
Sorry. I was just here for all your good news.
I'm still struggling with how to get the study done and the work for the police station.
The $150,000 warrant article proposal right now?
So is the building they are in at any point near being condemned?
No.
Okay.
No. If you'd like, and we did this, we knew that we would have the joint meeting of the planning board and select board on the 17th, and a primary topic of conversation for that meeting is a presentation on where to go from here for that building. And so connected with that, the fire department, the fire association hosted a spaghetti dinner last Saturday. And they invited, it was also an open house, and the police department was there, and so they took the public through the building, anybody that was interested. But they also sent out an invitation to the select board and planning board to say, hey, come take a look through the building. We'll give you a tour. Scott was one of the planning board members that showed up to that. But if this is an area that the budget committee is especially interested in, I'd be happy to arrange the budget committee to have a tour of the building from the police department. I think is the more impactful side. I don't know if Scott wants to mention his perspective, but we can arrange that if you'd like.
Yeah, well, it's sort of a package deal, right? You got to look at one, but yeah, it's important.
Okay, I'll work on. Well, here's an idea. Amy politely suggested that maybe next week's meeting we would cancel, because I'm not going to be here, and I think we'll have some data from I think we'll have a preliminary report from the total compensation study, but I think the select board will have just started looking at it on the 17th. So I think that's something the budget committee will want to probably digest. Maybe in lieu of a budget committee meeting next Wednesday, maybe it's a budget committee field trip to the public safety building with tours at 3:30 on Wednesday, the 19th.
I'm out of town.
And then we'd meet on the
This
25th.
week's not Thanksgiving week, is it?
It's the following week.
Okay.
And that's a Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
The 7th, 19th.
And then we meet on
Out
the
of
25th.
town next week.
Okay. Are the other members available and interested? Because certainly, Frida, we could get you into the building another time.
Yeah, of course.
it wouldn't have to be.
I've been, so I don't need to go.
I'd like to get a run through. I mean,
Absolutely.
I would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does that make sense for you all? And then that would give us the 25th to make a preliminary proposal to the select board, which in terms of the operating budget, I mean, Amy and I will summarize the recommendations to this point, but I don't think there's really anything outstanding in the operating budget, which we haven't covered or addressed. These numbers are wrong because we talked about adding back in the 20,000 for the rec. So our net impact is only 60,000 now. But
Yeah, we're just waiting for the compensation study.
for the wages. Yep. And I think that on the 25th, we'll be able to talk about that in earnest.
When are we going to see it, though?
I expect probably around the 17th, week and a day before.
Yeah, 25th, I'll be out of town, but I think I can still join remotely.
Okay. Yeah, the data that I think will be finalized, and the more impactful data I think for this group is what the market data says for each position and what the recommended classification for current positions is based on that data. And then the select board's subjective decision-making will relate to placement of incumbents in the new classifications. So that will be, the select board will have to have to wrap their head around that. And I think they'll want input from this group, and then any other changes to total compensation. I told you about the fact that I think we were very fortunate that our health insurance provider changed the definition of small group, large group, and so our health insurance premium increase is only 7% this year, where the average for plans and organizations is closer to like 20% this year. I think the school is supposed to get their number today or tomorrow, and they're expecting it to be more than 20%.
Are they with, is it called school choice?
They're with school care.
School care.
Yep. So anyways, that dynamic does something really interesting to our total compensation. So the preliminary data, and the consultants are still doing some work on it, but the preliminary data showed that dollar for dollar, the town of Barrington was spending about 10% more dollars on a health benefit than the labor market. Now, in some cases, that's 10% more dollars for the same level of coverage, because it could just cost us more than a large organization or whatever else. But regardless, in terms of total compensation and the buckets, and we are spending about 10% more than the labor market, the comparable labor market. So I think the select board are still likely to consider what they can do with the plan offerings and plan design to try to improve our liability for the health benefit that we provide. But I think what this year will do is, if the labor market and everybody else is increasing premiums an average of 20% and we're only increasing 7%, now in 2026, we're going to be level with the labor market. We're no longer going to be spending 10% more, because we're advancing at a much lower pace, a much slower pace than the labor market. So that's kind of going to be self-correcting because of this anomaly. And because now we're in the small groups, we will grow, I think, in line with the labor market. As a large group, there's just so much volatility, and they inflate your premiums so much because they don't know. You're a 33 member large group, and all one premium could throw one claim could throw their premium collection out the window. And so they just inflate premiums so much. And so we're really fortunate to be a small group again. So yeah, that will kind of be self-correcting, which will be interesting. And then the wage component is obviously important also. Okay.
So what do you think their tax impact will be overall?
What
The school, sorry.
Oh, tax impact?
Yeah, what do you think? Do you have any sense of where their budget is?
No. 2026, you mean?
Yeah.
No. I was invited and attended, as you know, because I left this meeting early. They brought in both school care and health trust to make a presentation to the entire school board and the collective bargaining units in the school. And I think they'd scheduled that hoping that they would have numbers from school care by then, so they could kind of talk real numbers. School care didn't have their numbers ready yet, so they didn't have that. One of the things that we delivered to health trust is the school countersigned a proposal request to health trust to ask what our premiums would look like if we did health insurance with the school. And so we've tried to go down that path a couple of times. I think there's mutual benefit. I think there's benefit to the taxpayers. This year will be interesting because our rates might not be lower than what we are able to get as a small group. And so, but we'll look at the numbers. So they're going to calculate that. They're going to prepare a proposal for us in that way. But no, I have not followed the school's budget process. I've heard that due to a declining enrollment, the school board will have an opportunity to consider staff reduction as a couple of classroom teachers. And so that could give them the ability to bring in a budget with a lesser impact. But the health insurance cost increase are are unavoidable because of their collective bargaining agreements, and they expect that to be a lot.
We wouldn't entertain anything with school care, would we?
I would not.
I mean, that sounds like risk plus.
Mhm. In the past, we've gotten proposals from them, but with the news that's available now, I would not feel comfortable
Thank you.
considering school care. So I think we have a good framework. We'll schedule a site visit for the next meeting, and sometime early next week, we'll have some data, we'll circulate some data from the total compensation study, and then we'll dedicate the meeting on the 25th to finalizing the budget proposal. Amy and I will put a draft together as it relates to the operating budget. We'll update the warrant article requests for that purpose, and then then focus on the total compensation study and what input this group has for that.
Good.
And then the select board will meet on the 1st, and I think we have a tentative, if needed, in December, right?
Yes.
On December 3rd. So the select board will meet on the 1st, and if we need to discuss, if they say, hey, we'd like you to reconsider this or look into that, we can do that on the 3rd, and then the select board is slated to finalize the budget proposal on the 8th. There weren't any other outstanding potential changes to capital reserve contributions, right?
I don't think there
We
was.
resolved all that. We were happy with the levels recommended for fire truck and highway heavy equipment.
Yep.
And we'll stick with 150 for paving, non-lapsing. Okay, awesome.
So the only item on the agenda we didn't deal with, but I think it's a non-issue, is debt service. So are we in agreement? We don't need to talk about debt service?
How much to talk about?
One of the things I'm asking our bond counsel about, of course, because bond proceeds, there's a slew of requirements, IRS and others. And because we'll have surplus bond proceeds, I want to know what we can and can't do with those dollars. And one of my questions to bond counsel is, could we use some of that surplus to cover bond repayment in 1 year? And I wouldn't have concerns about the default budget situation because it's a bond. We will have enough money in the budget to cover the bond anytime, regardless, whatever. I would have some trepidation as it relates to that's kind of artificially reducing the budget 1 year, and then we're going to have to bring that back up the next year. So that has potential drawbacks. I'd rather keep things stable. The other thing that I have asked about, and I think I know the answer to, but this will be a conversation with the select board. There's a couple of tens of thousands of dollars, maybe in the 20s, that will be left in bond proceeds. And there was a few early projects at the community center that identified some unanticipated issues, asbestos and other items. And the design build project had a list $300,000 long of additional alternatives in terms of value engineering. Hey, it'd be nice to do this, but we're going to value engineer it to that. And if we have money, then we can add this back in, kind of thing. And so I think something the select board might also consider is dedicating those surplus bond proceeds to contingency for the community center project until that's complete. If it's used, great. If not, then we'll go back to considering other options. But it might be nice to have that additional security. And the bond was originally approved for both projects, so that would be a pretty automatic.
I'd like to see the taxpayer work into this once in a while.
Well, and that I think that's where I think finding a way to put it in to reduce bond costs of the operating budget. But I think looking at the rebates and the other additional dollars as ways to get them back in the taxpayer's pocket as directly as possible is important. But I also think that for the community center project, if we have an opportunity to avoid future costs, right? Some of the projects we're looking at, it's okay, well, we can't do as part of the project. We'll start planning and budgeting for that now. If we could accomplish those now, then I think that would be better for the future taxpayer in that case.
Okay, anything else? We need move to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.